Good morning, Seattle Baptist Church. Hope you all are doing well. I just want to ask you a quick question this morning. How is your joy? How is your joy? Philippians chapter 4, verse number 4, very famous verse, says, "Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice." You know, as we are concluding our Christian school Bible class, we're covering the book of Acts and the life of Paul, and we're actually finishing that up today. Been able to teach that online. And it never ceases to amaze me as to how the Apostle Paul was such a joyful Christian, though all that he went through. The book of Philippians that we just quoted from was written from the Roman prison. But if you were to back up from there, you'd find that Paul was in prison at Caesarea for 2 years. They would be threatening Paul's life even while in prison. While Paul finally would go to Rome, they'd take that voyage and their ship would be caught in that storm, Euroclydon, and he'd suffer shipwreck. They'd swim for their lives, make it to the island, and Paul would be bitten by a venomous snake, and he would shake that off in the fire. And then finally, they would make their way up to Rome, where Paul would be imprisoned for another 2 years. There at Rome, Paul didn't know if he'd spend his last days in that prison cell or not. And then would finally be able to get a house rented, but still shackled to a Roman soldier. And it was from there that Paul would write this letter to those in Philippi. And you remember the famous story of Philippi is where Paul and Silas were in prison there and would sing praises to God after being beaten and imprisoned. And I think the key to all of that is where Paul says to rejoice in the Lord. I'm so glad that we can have joy, and it's the joy of the Lord in our hearts, and it does not rest in our circumstances. Our circumstances change quickly. Our circumstances change unexpectedly, but we find rest. Our joy rests in the Lord, in Jesus Christ, and He never changes. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Some of the greatest Christians in that history tells us about were Christians, were people who suffered affliction. They had physical sufferings in their lives. Paul the Apostle even did, but yet they were full of joy. It's such a mark of the Spirit-filled Christian. Joy is the fruit of the Spirit. And so I'm so thankful that our joy is not found in our circumstances. It's found in the Lord. And I trust today that you and I would both find joy and that our joy would be in the Lord.